It began in the most innocent of ways, with the clatter of dice across a wooden board and the eager chatter of children gathered around a game that promised fairness but always carried the temptation of bending the rules. The boy who first pocketed a card that didn't belong to him, the girl who nudged her token an extra square when no one was watching, the uncle who slipped an extra bill from the bank while distracting the others with a joke, small cheats, barely noticed, half excused as part of the fun. But the lesson was there, etched silently into the minds of those who played. The quickest path to victory often lay in the shadows, not in the rules. Those shadows lengthened as the players grew older. The boy with the hidden card became the young man who knew how to bluff his way through exams with stolen notes taped beneath his sleeve. The girl who moved her token became the woman who found ways to nudge the truth in her favor at work, presenting others' ideas as her own with a careful smile. The uncle's easy sleight of hand grew into something darker, a quiet talent for cutting corners in business deals, where signatures could be forged and numbers could be massaged until they sang a more pleasing tune. What began as a game of cheats evolved into a philosophy, unspoken but shared. Rules were for those who couldn't outwit them. Each small victory over honesty became a foundation stone, building toward bigger risks, bigger rewards, and bigger lies. Board games turned into office politics turned into corporate strategy. The stakes grew, but the thrill of getting away with it remained the same. It wasn't long before the same principles that governed a family game night found themselves in the boardrooms of billion-dollar companies. A misplaced decimal in a financial statement here, a buried clause in a contract there, cheats, refined and polished, but cheats all the same. The players smiled in tailored suits, shaking hands under the glow of chandeliers, while beneath the surface, they had cards up their sleeves as deftly as they once had at the kitchen table. And the world rewarded them. Investors praised their vision, shareholders toasted their genius, and the public consumed their stories with awe. Few noticed the tricks. Fewer still questioned the fairness of the game, because winning has a way of silencing doubt. To the victors went the spoils, and to the clever went the applause. But the game never stopped. It simply grew more complex. The dice were no longer plastic but rolled in markets where billions could vanish overnight. The tokens were no longer shaped like dogs or ships but were companies, fortunes, entire industries. Every deal, every merger, every innovation carried with it the faint echo of a child's laugh, the memory of a stolen turn, the first taste of dishonest triumph. In the quiet moments, some of the players remembered how it all started. They thought of the board spread out on living room carpets, the laughter that masked suspicion, the thrill of outsmarting family and friends in harmless fun. They remembered how easily they had convinced themselves that it was nothing more than play, that the rules didn't matter when everyone was just pretending. What they did not realize was that the pretending never ended, only the stakes changed. And so, from board games to billion-dollar scams, the arc remained the same. It was a story written in dice rolls and balance sheets, in laughter and lawsuits, in cards drawn from the wrong deck and fortunes built on sand. A game of cheats, always waiting for its next player, always promising the same simple truth. In every game, someone will choose to win by breaking the rules. The story did not end with one generation. The habit of bending rules was passed like a family heirloom, subtle and unspoken, tucked between bedtime stories and dinner table lessons. A child who grew up watching a father adjust the score in a card game learned that winning was more important than honesty. A daughter who saw her mother sweet-talk her way out of a parking ticket learned that cleverness could outweigh justice. These lessons, small and invisible, worked their way into the marrow of ambition. The boy who once slipped a Monopoly bill into his pocket grew into a man who understood balance sheets not as records of truth, but as instruments to be tuned. At first, the cheats were simple, shaving minutes from a timesheet, inflating an expense claim, pretending to work late while sneaking out early. These acts seemed harmless, even justified by the culture around him. Everyone did it, so why shouldn't he? But each success at deception brought a rush, a thrill that demanded something greater. He found his calling in finance. There, the rules seemed written in smoke, numbers dancing in columns that no one truly understood. With a stroke of creativity, he could make a loss appear as a gain, a risk appear as a certainty. He rose quickly, celebrated as a genius by those too dazzled by his results to question his methods. Behind the glass walls of his office, with the city's skyline glittering at night, he felt the same exhilaration he once felt when he slid his game piece ahead 2 spaces without being caught. Only now the stakes were millions, not play money. In another city, another life, a girl who once peeked at her opponent's cards in a childhood game grew into a woman who learned the art of corporate persuasion. She had a smile that could disarm auditors, a charm that made investors overlook fine print. She mastered the cheat of omission, not lying outright, but never revealing the full truth. Her empire grew on promises half-kept, on deals that looked solid but rested on foundations thinner than glass. Each success was toasted at banquets, her name appearing in glossy magazines. Yet beneath it all, the game remained unchanged, a contest of wits, where the rules existed only for those too weak to break them. As years passed, the cheats became systems, and the systems became industries. What started as a hidden card under the table turned into multinational scams, Ponzi schemes, insider trading, fraudulent accounting scandals that shook entire economies. Governments intervened, courts prosecuted, headlines screamed. Yet even then, the game continued, only shifting its form. For every cheater caught, another stepped forward, sharper, smarter, bolder, ready to test the boundaries again. The irony was cruel. The world, disgusted by scandal, secretly admired the cunning behind it. People cursed the names of swindlers while secretly wondering if they themselves, given the chance, might have done the same. After all, hadn't everyone once moved a piece forward when no one was watching? Hadn't everyone once hidden a card, slipped an extra bill, told a lie so small it barely felt like one at all? And so the cycle spun on. Children sat at tables, rolling dice and drawing cards, their laughter echoing with innocence. Somewhere among them, a hand lingered too long near the pile of bills, a piece slid forward 1 square too many. No one noticed, or if they did, they laughed and let it pass. And in that moment, another player entered the endless game, a game that begins with board games but never ends, stretching onward into boardrooms, into banks, into the fabric of the world itself. Because the truth was simple, and it had been written into the story from the very beginning. The game of cheats never stopped. It only grew richer, riskier, and infinitely more rewarding for those who dared to play. The game spread beyond families and individuals, weaving itself into the very structure of society. What began with a child's sneaky glance at a deck of cards became a quiet epidemic, a way of life masked as ambition. At first, it was personal, small victories, private lies, but over time, the cheats grew collective. Whole groups learned to conspire, bending the rules together, convinced that the end justified the means. In universities, students whispered formulas to each other during exams, sharing stolen notes, not realizing they were training themselves for future boardroom collusion. In small businesses, owners cut corners on safety measures, telling themselves it was just to survive, only to grow into tycoons who manipulated entire markets. In governments, leaders hid scandals beneath patriotic speeches, promising reform while secretly shifting funds. Everywhere the same principle applied. Winning was worth more than fairness, and those who hesitated to cheat were destined to lose. The boy who cheated at Monopoly became a man celebrated as a financial wizard. Reporters marveled at how he turned failing companies into gold mines. No one asked why the numbers never quite added up, why the growth seemed too fast, too flawless. He sat in meetings with investors who nodded at his every word, blind to the cards he kept tucked away. For years, he lived as if the board belonged to him alone, until one day the dice betrayed him. A single investigation unraveled the web, and the empire crumbled in a storm of lawsuits and headlines. The cameras caught him leaving court in handcuffs, but behind his eyes, the same glimmer remained, the glimmer of a boy who had almost won, who would play again if given the chance. The girl who peeked at her opponent's cards grew into a woman who built her empire on trust she never intended to honor. Her charm filled boardrooms, her promises convinced nations, and her signature became a symbol of progress. Yet beneath her skyscrapers lay debts hidden like cards shoved under the table. When the collapse came, it was sudden, ruthless, and devastating. Thousands lost their savings, whole communities suffered, but in her private reflections, she thought not of those she had ruined, but of the thrill, the intoxicating rush of getting away with it, for as long as she did. Even the uncle, the one who once slipped an extra note from the family's game night bank, played his part. He never rose to fame, never built empires, but he carried the same instinct in quieter ways. He skimmed profits from a small company, cut deals in back alleys, lied to those who trusted him. His cheats never made headlines, but they ruined lives just the same, rippling outward in ways no one noticed until it was too late. His life was proof that the game didn't always lead to glory. Sometimes it ended in nothing but silence and regret. The thread between them all was unbroken. Each story, each downfall, each triumph was part of the same game, a game older than dice and boards, older than money itself. Cheating was not merely an act, but a current that ran through human ambition, tempting players with shortcuts, whispering promises of victory without toil. Some were caught and punished, others slipped through cracks and thrived, but all shared the same addiction: the rush of bending rules and believing themselves cleverer than the rest. And still, in living rooms across the world, children laughed over boards scattered with pieces. Dice tumbled, cards shuffled, coins clinked in their tiny plastic trays. Somewhere, a hand reached out too quickly, sliding a piece forward, taking a bill too many. The others laughed or groaned, but rarely stopped the game. No one said it aloud, but the lesson was there once again, passed down quietly, invisibly, into the future. Because the truth was not that some cheated and others did not. The truth was that everyone, at some moment, stood at the edge of the same choice: to play by the rules or to break them. And the world, as it always had, belonged not to the honest, but to the clever, those who dared to play the game of cheats.